Hello everybody, this is Ryan from Rat Gaming. In my last video I forgot to add to cover the avatar panel, which is pretty important. So this video is going to be more of an addendum to the last one, hence part 2. So without further ado, let's get into Unity. Alright, so here in Unity, the one thing that I want to point you guys' attention to is we have our model selected here, the paladin in the project. But you'll see in the rig tab that it's when set to humanoid and generic, you have an option for an avatar definition. That's what I mean by an avatar. Now in humanoid, it has a configure button, but in generic it does not. It just has the root node. Also, if you set your model's rig to humanoid, you can actually, if you go down into the models hierarchy, extend it, see all its children, you'll see that the avatar is actually in there as well, and it also has a configure avatar button. Legacy and generic. Legacy doesn't even have an avatar definition. And generic has one, but that's only because with generic and humanoid, the character can be run by the Anim animator, which requires an avatar definition. Legacy characters cannot have their animations run by the Anim animator. You have to call them through scripts and whatnot, which is kind of the advantage of Anim over Legacy. You don't need as much scripting. But the other advantage for using humanoid over Legacy and even generic is that you can share animations across humanoid characters that have the same avatar layout, so the same bone structure and hierarchy and stuff like that. Otherwise, with generics and legacies, their animations are tied to their respective models. You can't take an animation made for one legacy character and move it over to another legacy character, not without remaking or reapplying the animation through a modeler or animator program and then exporting it again. So that's the advantage of using a humanoid system over the other two. So now with that explained, let's hop into the avatar window. God dang it, stop doing that. Hit config and you'll open this into Unity will open it in its own little avatar configuration scene. So what's in here is where all your information is going to be for your avatar. You have the mapping and the muscles and muscle settings and whatnot. You also see that it has references to the bones and what they're associated with. So you got hips, the hip bone, which is the hips, spine, which is spine, chest, which is chest, and upper chest, which has no reference, which is fine because it is an optional bone. It's not needed. No, well, not absolutely needed anyway. You can tell something is optional just by the dotted lines around it instead of the solid. So don't freak out if your model is lacking an optional bone. Now the other thing is that while you're in avatar configuration, what you can do is click on individual bones, and you just like normal game objects, you can rotate them, you can move them around, all that. Now you'll notice that as I do that, it ends up saying that character is not in a T-pose. That's important because if the character isn't in T-pose, it will not animate correctly. Typically what you'll see is if that's the case, then the character will play the animations for the most part fine, except for the body part that's out of T-pose. So here you'll see that the bone that's out of T-pose is red. So what you can do is you can come down here in the inspector, click on pose and enforce T-pose. And while this does work and it does make the character kind of legal in terms of Unity, is that the issue you'll find is that because it's kind of different than the other leg, this leg is going to animate slightly different than this leg. So like in walking poses and walking movements and stuff like that, this leg will probably look a little funky. And by a little, sometimes it can be a lot. And also, one thing that Unity's T-pose validator will do is you can actually have a valid T-pose even if a bone is completely turned the wrong direction. For example, rotated completely around. And I've seen this a number of times on skeletons and things like that, but this one doesn't want to do it. I don't. But I'll go over that in the next video, specifically. So let's just undo all that. And even if the bone is just slightly out of whack, it can cause animation wonkiness, so to speak. And in most cases, I find that the culprits that end up having that are either the legs or the hands. Those seem to be the biggest issues when it comes to animations with issues. And more so, I'm referring to the Mixamo website, because when you're downloading Mixamo animations, you will eventually run into an animation that you got that you're like, ooh, I want to put this in my game, and then when you go to test it, something just isn't right about it. Even though it looked perfectly fine on Mixamo's website and their previewer. For some reason, when it downloads and imports into Unity, it just doesn't read correctly, and the bones sometimes go haywire. But in the next video, I'll go over some examples on how to fix that, as well as just applying animations to the Mechanim controller and whatnot. So until then, that'll be all, and I will see you in the next video.